The cake was still on the counter when I got home. 3 layers. Cream cheese frosting. The kind my sister always asked me to make for her birthday. I had driven 4 hours to Atlanta for her party, baked it the night before, wrapped it in plastic and carried it carefully in the back seat like it was something fragile. Like it was something worth protecting. I should have known then. I always treated things that way, carefully, gently, like they deserved more than they usually gave back. But that wasn't the worst part of that weekend. My name is Claire, I'm 31 years old, and I work as a medical billing specialist in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm not rich. I've never pretended to be. But I'm careful with money the way people are careful when they grew up, watching their parents fight over it at the kitchen table. I save. I budget. I check my accounts every Sunday morning with a cup of coffee. Same routine for 6 years. I know what's in my accounts. I always know. Which is why, when I checked my phone on the drive back from Atlanta and saw a balance that made no sense, I pulled off the highway. I sat in a Sunoco parking lot in Spartanburg, South Carolina, with the engine running and both hands on my phone, reading the same number 3 times. My checking account, the one I'd been building for 2 years, to cover a down payment on a house, showed $411. It was supposed to show $19,200. I want you to sit with that number for a second. $19,200. 26 months of transfers, of skipped vacations, of saying no to things I wanted, so I could say yes to something that actually mattered. A home. Something mine. $411. I called the bank before I even called anyone else. The representative told me there had been a series of transfers over the past 4 days. Zelle transactions. All authorized from my account through my mobile app, all to the same external account. I had never set up a Zelle recipient by that name. I hadn't made a single one of those transfers, but my login had been used. My phone number was on the account. And apparently, 2 days before I drove to Atlanta, someone had requested a new verification code to my number, reset my credentials, and spent 4 days moving money out in amounts small enough not to trigger an automatic fraud alert. 800 here. 1,200 there. One transfer for $4,000 that went through at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. The representative flagged the account and opened a dispute. She was kind. She told me these things take time. I sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes. Then I drove home. I didn't call my sister that night. I didn't call anyone. I needed to think, and I needed to think clearly. And I knew that the moment I started talking about it out loud, something inside me was going to break open that I wasn't ready to deal with yet. I made a list instead. That's what I do when things feel out of control. I write down what I know. What I knew. Someone had accessed my account remotely. They knew my phone number. They knew my login email. They had transferred nearly $19,000 over 4 days while I was busy at work, while I was baking a birthday cake, while I was driving south on I-85 with a playlist going, and no idea my life was being quietly taken apart. What I didn't know yet. Who? I stared at that list for a long time. Then I thought about the weekend. I thought about Friday night, when I'd arrived at my parents' house in Atlanta, and my mother had immediately asked if I could help my brother with something on his phone. I thought about how my brother had handed me his phone, and while I was looking at it, my mother had said she needed to borrow mine for a second to look something up, because hers was charging in the other room. I had handed it to her without thinking. I had been gone maybe 6 minutes. Long enough to help my brother reset a streaming password. Long enough for someone who knew what they were doing to request a verification code, screenshot it, and start building a new access point into everything I'd spent 2 years growing. I put the list down. I didn't sleep that night. I want to be honest about something. I know what some of you are thinking, because I've thought it too. I should have had 2-factor authentication linked to an email, not just a phone number. I should have never handed my phone to anyone, not even for a moment, not even to family. I should have had account alerts set for any transaction over $50. I know all of that now in the way you know things after they've already cost you. The version of me that existed before that weekend trusted her family the way you trust the floor under your feet, not because you've tested it, but because it's always just been there. You don't think about it. You just walk. And then one day the floor isn't there, and you realize you never actually checked. I went back to Atlanta 3 days later. I didn't tell my sister I was coming. I drove down on a Tuesday morning, called in sick to work, and I sat in that thought for the entire 3-hour drive, the possibility that I was wrong, that there was some other explanation, that I would walk into that house and feel stupid and relieved. I wanted to be wrong. I want you to know that. More than almost anything, I wanted there to be a version of this where I was wrong. My mother was home. My brother was home. My father was at work. I sat down at the kitchen table and I told them what I knew. Not everything, not yet. I told them my account had been accessed and that the bank was investigating. I watched their faces. My mother looked at the table. My brother looked at my mother. That was all I needed to see. I asked my mother directly. I kept my voice even. I said, "Mom, did you go into my phone when I was helping my brother on Friday?" She was quiet for a long time, long enough that the silence became its own answer. Then she said, "We needed it, Claire. We needed it more than you do right now. You're young. You'll earn it back." I need you to understand that I had rehearsed this conversation in my head 17 times on the drive down. I had imagined her crying, or denying it, or getting angry. I had prepared myself for all of those. I had not prepared myself for calm, for the simple, flat certainty that what she had done was reasonable, that my savings were a resource she had weighed against her own needs and found available. You'll earn it back. I was 31 years old, sitting at a kitchen table where I had eaten cereal as a child, and my mother was telling me that nearly $20,000 I had saved by myself, with no help from anyone in that house, was something I would just earn back. I said one thing. I said, "No, I won't be doing that." And I got up, and I left. My brother followed me to the car. I want to give him this. At least he was the only one who followed me. He stood by my car door, and he looked genuinely uncomfortable, which was the most honesty I'd seen from anyone in that house in 3 days. He told me things had been bad, that they had credit card debt going back years, that my father had cut his hours, that they'd been scared to tell me because I'd been the one who got out, and they didn't want me to feel responsible. I listened to all of it. Then I asked him if he had known what my mother was planning before she did it. He didn't answer. I said, "That's a yes." He said, "Claire." I said, "Don't." I got in the car and I drove back to Charlotte. Here is what I did that week, because I promised myself, and I'm promising you that this story isn't going to be another one where the woman just walks away and hopes for the best. I went to the police. I know that sounds hard. I know it was my mother. I know it was my family. And I also know that what she did has a name, and the name is fraud. And I wasn't going to let the fact that she raised me make the name disappear. The officer I spoke to was patient. He explained the process. I gave him the bank records, the Zelle transaction history, the timestamps, the IP addresses the bank had flagged during the investigation. It was thorough, more thorough than I expected. My bank's fraud department had already traced the transfers and confirmed the access was unauthorized based on the device and location data. They were cooperating fully. The detective assigned to the case told me it was, in his words, straightforward. That didn't make it feel straightforward, but it helped to hear. I also called a lawyer, not because I wanted to sue my mother, because I needed to understand my options, and I needed someone in my corner who wasn't emotionally involved. The lawyer I spoke with told me that identity fraud charges, combined with the documented transfer history, meant recovery was realistic. Not guaranteed, but realistic. I changed every password, every account. I set up a new email address that no family member has ever seen. I linked my authentication to that email and to a new phone number. I turned on alerts for every transaction over $25. I did all of this in one night, sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of water, working through a checklist with the kind of focus you develop when you realize you should have done something a long time ago. There's a conversation I've had with myself 100 times since then. It goes like this: how did I not see it? And the honest answer is, I saw pieces of it for years. I just chose to read them as something else. My mother had always been good at making her emergencies feel like my obligations. A car repair that couldn't wait. A medical bill that was going to collections. A deposit for an apartment my brother needed, so he didn't have to sleep on a friend's couch. Every time there was urgency. Every time there was the quiet suggestion that if I really cared about this family, I wouldn't make them ask twice. I had given them money over the years. Not $19,000 at once. I wasn't stupid. Or at least I didn't think I was, but in smaller amounts, consistently, for things that felt real and pressing in the moment. 400 here, 800 there. Once. $2,000 toward my father's medical costs that I later found out weren't quite what I'd been told. I used to think I gave it because I loved them. Now I think I gave it because I had learned very early that love in that house came with conditions. And one of the conditions was financial generosity, and every time I handed over money, I was buying myself another few months of being the good daughter. The one who made it. The one who came through. I'm not proud of that, but I think it's important to say, when the access became direct, when the asking was removed and the taking replaced it, I don't think they saw that as a different category. I think they saw it as the same transaction, just with the paperwork cut out. She has it. We need it. We're family. The math is simple. That's what makes it hard to explain to people who haven't lived it. It wasn't just theft. It was the logical endpoint of a dynamic that I had participated in for years. They didn't break a rule. They just finally stopped pretending there were rules. The case is still open. I want to be honest about that too, because I watched a story on this channel once where someone mentioned a subpoena and then nothing, no follow-up, no resolution, and it made me want to throw something at the screen. Here's what I know as of now. The bank has recovered approximately $6,300 through the dispute process. The remaining amount is part of the ongoing investigation. My attorney has told me there is a strong possibility of civil recovery in addition to the criminal case. I don't know exactly how this ends, but I know it doesn't end with me pretending it didn't happen. My father called me 6 weeks after I went to the police. It was the first call I'd accepted from anyone in my family since that Tuesday in Atlanta. He wanted to know if I understood what I was doing to the family. He said my mother was scared. He said she had made a mistake and she needed me to drop it. I said, "She took $19,000 from me, Dad." He said, "She's your mother." I said, "Yes, she is." There was a long pause. He said something I didn't fully hear. Then I said I had to go. And I ended the call. And I sat on my couch for a while in the quiet of my apartment, listening to the city outside my window. That was the last time I spoke to anyone in my immediate family. I want to talk about my brother for a second, because he is the most complicated part of this, and I think I owe it honesty. He was not the one who took the money. He did not access my phone, but he knew. He knew what was being planned, and he let me drive 4 hours to a birthday party and bake a cake and sit in that house and help him with a streaming password while the plan was already in motion. And he said nothing. There's a version of forgiveness I'm working toward, somewhere in the distance. Not the version where none of it happened. Not the version where we pretend. The version where I understand that he is someone who has been shaped by the same dynamic I grew up in, who learned the same lessons about survival and loyalty that I learned, and who made a different choice than I did when it mattered. I understand it. I don't excuse it. Those are two different things. He texted me once, about a month after everything. He said he was sorry. He said he should have called me. He said he didn't know how to fix it. I read it 3 times. I didn't respond. Maybe I will someday. I honestly don't know. There's a house I looked at in March. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a kitchen with actual counter space, a neighborhood where I could hear birds in the morning. I had printed the listing and put it on my fridge the week before my sister's birthday. I used to look at it when I was making coffee and think about timelines, about how close I was getting, about what it would feel like to have somewhere that was entirely mine. I took it down after everything. Not because I gave up on the idea, because I needed to stop looking at something that reminded me of what had been taken. But I've started looking at listings again. Different ones, different neighborhoods. Something I'm doing for me, on my own schedule, with money that belongs to me and no one else. The down payment will take longer now. That's just the truth of it, and I've made peace with sitting in the truth rather than decorating around it. It will take longer. The timeline I had built is gone. The version of my future that I planned is not the version I'm walking toward now, but I'm still walking. I've been thinking lately about what it means to grow up in a house where the boundaries around your own things, your own time, your own money, your own choices are treated as suggestions rather than facts, where saying no is a form of cruelty, and saying yes is the minimum requirement for love. I spent a lot of years believing that loyalty meant availability, that being a good daughter meant not having limits, that every time I drew a line, I was being selfish, and every time I erased the line to let someone across, I was being generous. It took $19,000 and a parking lot in South Carolina for me to understand the difference between generosity and surrender. Generosity is a choice you make freely, from a place of fullness, because you want to give. Surrender is what happens when you've been taught that your fullness isn't yours to keep. I'm not surrendering anymore. The other day I was on the phone with my best friend. She's known me since college. She was the first person I called after the police report, and she asked me how I was really doing. Not the version I tell people at work. Not the version where I'm fine and moving forward and it's okay. The real version. I told her I was angry. Not the hot kind of angry that burned out somewhere around month 2. The quiet kind. The kind that lives underneath things and changes how you see. I told her I was grieving, even though I didn't lose anyone to death, which still feels strange to say out loud. I told her that some mornings I woke up, and the first thought I had was just the number, $19,200. Like my brain needed to verify it was still real. She said, "Is there anything you miss about them?" I thought about it for a long time. I said, "I miss who I thought they were." She didn't say anything for a second. Then she said, "That's allowed. If you're watching this and you've been the person who always comes through the one the family calls, the one who fixes it, the one who gives and gives because you were taught, that's what love looks like. I want to say something directly to you. You are allowed to have things that are yours. You are allowed to have a savings account that no one knows the details of. You are allowed to say, 'I can't help right now' without a 3-paragraph explanation. You are allowed to love people and still have a door with a lock on it. The people who taught you that having limits made you selfish were wrong. They were wrong, and they were usually wrong because it was convenient for them to be wrong, and you don't owe anyone your financial security in exchange for belonging in your own family. Change your passwords. Set up alerts. Know your numbers. Not because you're paranoid, because you worked for what you have, and working for something means it's yours. I'm still in Charlotte. I still make coffee on Sunday mornings and check my accounts. Same as always. Except now the numbers are different, and the routine means something different than it used to. It used to feel like maintenance. Now it feels like something closer to respect for myself, for the years I put in, for the version of my future that I'm still building, even though it looks different than the one I planned. I keep the listing in a folder on my phone now instead of on the fridge. Sometimes I look at it. Sometimes I look at new ones. I don't need it to be the exact house anymore. I just need it to be mine. That's the part no one can take. They took the money. They took the version of the family I thought I had. They took the timeline I had planned and the ease I used to feel when I drove south on the highway. But they didn't take the part of me that saved in the first place. The part that got up every day and did the work and believed that the future was worth building toward. That part is still here. I didn't lose a home. I lost an illusion. And some mornings, not all of them, but some I wake up and the first thing I feel isn't the number. It's something quieter. Something that feels, slowly, like it might be free.